nice and comfortable. All right. So, as the title states, we are just going to discuss 10th a little bit. Played a few games myself. Well, I should say a lot more than a few. Played about 5 games myself, watched a couple other games, listened to what other people have been doing and playing as well. Oh, there's such a massive delay. Oh, that's why. Okay. I just kind of want to give general impressions of the game thus far. Obviously, technically, the rules just came out on Saturday, but obviously through the leaks and whatnot, was able to start playing last weekend. Since we had the points, index cards, and everything else, terrain rules and everything. So the game plan with this is to just kind of go through the woes of the new edition. Gonna try keeping it as positive as possible. I know, especially if anybody knows me, how against I've been of 10th thus far. A lot of my concerns have kind of been proven true. Some other things were proven wrong. And as I said, I'm going to definitely try my hardest to keep this as positive as possible. Obviously, somebody just doesn't want to watch somebody rambling and ranting about how horrible everything is forever. So, the way I kind of wanted to approach this was to kind of get the egregiously negative things out of the way first. So, the biggest thing, which I think, if anybody's been paying attention whatsoever to everything happening in 10th, is all the issues with Eldar. I think, obviously, as a community and everything that happened in Germany with their GT that's going on, it's abundantly clear there's a lot of things going on with that index. I keep wanting to say codex, but yeah, it's. Don't want to get into it too much. We all know the problems, devastating wounds with Fate Dice. If people are unaware entirely, pretty much with D cannons, I believe the Wraith Knights have it as well. Because you have Strains of Fate, and that mechanic where you can automatically use a wound dice to make it count as a 6, that makes the devastating wounds profile just be mortals right away, so therefore you just instantly get a whole bunch of damage into whatever target you want the damage to go into. On top of that being an issue, having the towering keyword is also not very helpful. It definitely lets you abuse a few more things. It's just, I feel honestly worse, not necessarily for the people that have to face against it, but for like the Eldari players. Because obviously, you want to be playing a faction that's good, but you don't necessarily want to be playing a faction that's completely busted. Does it specify what numbers are what on here? Yeah, I'm assuming it's just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Oh no, wait. Wait a minute. Where is what Fate Dice are on the index? Oh, it's pseudo miracle dice now. See, I'm glad I reread this. So it changed a little bit, but you just get an astronomical butt ton. You start with 12. I know, what was it? Eldred added 3 more. I know Farseers did some goofy stuff with them. you. This is the one thing I kind of wish the indexes were organized a little bit better with. I guess I'm going to just control F. Garcier. Oh, okay, maybe not. Eldred. Another Eldred. There we go. What do they do? Oh, he can. Oh, they just make it a 6. Oh, yeah, see? Yeah, that's the. Yeah. So again, that's obviously the biggest boogeyman right now is this concept. Getting free 6s hasn't always felt nice. I mean, I know when I was playing Sisters, people said the same thing. So I understand. It's kind of a frustrating mechanic. But like I said, it's hard to really talk about 10th and wanting to talk about this army in the same sentence because it's not fair. The other big boogeymen, kind of for like the polar opposite decision or reasoning, are knights. The big issue with knights, from what I've been hearing from people, I haven't had a chance to play them. I've seen them play. Was the fact that they're just hella cheap, apparently. Yeah, you can kind of get away like doing some crazy stuff for how cheap they are. Also, the new towering keyword makes them a little oppressive as well. Basically, just ignoring 70% of the terrain on the table is always brutal. And the towering keyword now, what it does is it lets models with the keyword towering basically ignore obscuring terrain. So unlike 9th edition, where in 9th edition, if I saw you as a knight, well, once you were over 18 wounds, it kind of got to the point where I can be obscured by terrain, but you can't be. So there were those weird things where I could find an angle in a building where I could shoot you, but you couldn't shoot me. So I understand the frustrations for Knights players to say, well, that wasn't fun for us. We want some kind of change. Unfortunately, I think they went the wrong direction with it. I don't know how you balance it, though. Like, that's the big issue back, right? Is you obviously want to give them some playability where they don't feel like they're just getting completely, the short end of the stick when it comes to the game again, where they just look at big guns and they just go, oh, cool, you can see me, I can't see you, I guess I just die now. So I understand the frustration from both sides. How you fix it and proposed fixes, I mean, that's something I plan on talking about later. It's really hard to gauge and really hard to tell. Another big problem that I'm personally seeing with the game is, so initially, obviously the goal of this game is to play it in a sense where you feel like your prowess on the battlefield matters. Understanding the game, understanding your army, understanding the mechanics of the battlefield, all of those things playing a factor and contributing to having a good, fun, well-balanced game. Obviously, there's going to be kind of that rock, paper, scissors mentality where some things, sometimes some armies are going to be better versus the others, and that's just the way it goes. That's how mechanics are built. That's how you have like an internal balance where that way you just can't have one army just consistently good and everybody else trying to catch up to them, which is kind of where we're at the beginning of this new edition. So that was my biggest problem, is that it's abundantly clear that if your data sheet is just statically better than mine, you're going to have the upper hand. If you have the ability to get things natively with lethal hits or devastating wounds or sustained hits, or you can improve that those things are triggering on 5s and 6s. If you have more anti-X keywords, so anti-tanker, anti-infantry, anti-psyker, like it's just a data sheet will be better than a different data sheet, and that just makes it better overall. Versus like finding those pieces of the puzzle, connecting them, and then my army was built better than yours. So like it kind of takes away that factor. It's abundantly clear that there's very good data sheets, very bad data sheets, and things are just not worth playing. Even coming from my neck of the woods, because obviously I just tested Custodes, because that's my favorite army since I really got into the game, started taking it super serious. I personally, I kind of got into a little bit of a debate on the subreddit between what's better, the just regular Custodian Guard or the Wardens. For me personally, I still think it's the Wardens. I think the data card just gives you everything you're looking for as a Custode player, and the Custodian Guard is just a more expensive version or a more expensive concept to do what the Wardens do for the model count. So that's my other big issue, is that the balancing of the individual data sheets kind of feels like they missed the mark. Even within their own armies, not necessarily just player A versus player B. This is kind of a funny one that I both like and dislike is cover. I liked the simplification of cover of like, well, I'm towed on, so I get light cover. Well, you can see this part of me, so I don't get light cover, or I now have dense cover, but I get dense cover and light cover, and it's like simplifying the concept of like, hey, if you can't see, fully, I get cover, and that's just that. Ruins, I have to be wholly within a ruin to shoot out of it, kind of thing. Like that's all that stuff really took away from the cheeky nonsense of, well, my base is touching the edge of the building so I can shoot through it. It's like, okay, if I put my body against a door, doesn't mean I can shoot through it. So it's like, but the problem is that with cover, even if one model can't be seen out of your 10-man unit, my whole unit gets the save versus just that one model. So that's where that kind of fell apart, was pretty much in 10th edition. A lot of people have already talked about it. You always will have cover. It doesn't make a difference pretty much what you do. If you don't get cover, it's kind of your own fault kind of thing. But pretty much everything should have cover, which with the edition that got less lethal, for some armies it's going to feel pretty bad that it exists. Again, a pro and a con is that I both love and hate the cover rules. I hate the simplification of list building. I guess that's kind of a double-edged sword. I like the simplification of I no longer need, like, I guess they do have those rules still. I don't know. It feels too easy to list build now. The creativity from this building got taken away. So I enjoy the ease of it, because even though some people have kind of been against it, I don't mind having war gear essentially be free. I wasn't neither here nor there on it. If it's free, it's free. If it's not, it's not. I personally have, no skin in the game on that one. But it's one of those things where it's, once you find a good chemical equation of your army, I don't think there's anything different you can do or should do. So again, using Custodes as an example, there was a long time where there was like 3 meta builds where you could have gone bike heavy, where you ran like 9 bikes and a whole bunch of just like MSU, like Sagittarum and Custodi Guard. Or you could have just gone all, boots on the ground, where it was just like big bricks of Custodi Guard. So this is before the Warden buff. But yeah, you pretty much just had a whole bunch of like Custodi guys or Custodi Guards and some dreads. Like I said, it was just a whole bunch of just boots on the ground. So there's a whole bunch of guys being able to hold objectives that were really hard to take off of objectives. Or you could have taken like the heavy dreadnought / vehicle style, where it was like the Caladius Grav tanks, a whole bunch of Achilles, a whole bunch of Galatis, and just a couple, like maybe like prosecutor style units, or like a sword and board unit here or there, just to kind of be your extra objective holders. But all 3 of them had validity, and all 3 of them were played, and people had fun playing all 3 of them. I've played all versions of it. I just didn't have any Caladius. So I kind of, played I did test a 6 Dreadnought list on TTS a couple times, but otherwise it was pretty much just like boots on the ground for me until Wardens kind of became super meta again. So I started playing Bikes and Wardens, and it was super fun. But I don't feel like we have that. Like for Custodes, again, the biggest debate between people have been: do we go Wardens or do we just go Guard? And that's where they create. I mean, I guess the Forge World changes may change that concept up a little bit, but for me personally, I just think that you take your 1,200 points between Wardens and 3 characters, and then you got about like 860-ish points to just kind of do what you want with. Now that we have the graph, that actually splashing in 2 Gladius graph tanks in that list might be absolutely disgusting. They're good enough backfield objective holders and flank holders. So I mean, I don't know. But I feel like the creativity from this building definitely got taken away. I feel like we're going to see a lot of redundant stuff. Hopefully, obviously, with FAQs and data changes and stuff like that, we'll start seeing a bit more diversity. But as of right now, I feel like we're going to see one thing and one thing only for each army. And it's going to be kind of a bland format for a while. Other things I was really against... I'm kind of getting to like this gray area now where it's like things I don't like but like at the same time. I know initially I was super, super against having characters inside of units. I thought it was going to be a very boring playstyle, but I ended up discovering I liked it. I just wish for some units / some characters, it didn't feel like you needed them to be in a unit to be effective. It feels like for some characters, for some armies, where it's like, oh, you look at the character, it's like, well, this thing is just terrible. But if I attach him to the unit he can be attached to, he just now becomes like a god. Like he becomes such a good character because the buffs he provides. I wish they would have given the ability for characters to be good as a lone operative or as a character inside of a unit, and just reworked how Looked Out Sir worked. Made it more, make it a little bit more difficult for players to achieve Lookout Sir. So that way people just didn't feel like they were getting cheated by it, because that rule was a very shoddy rule in the first place. But I wish they would have given the characters, a little bit more love for some of them. Obviously not all of them, but some of them I kind of wish you could be like, all right, cool, I can run you by yourself, and you could carry your own and you can do stuff. That's not entirely the case for each single character. So that was something that, again, that was a pleasant surprise. Actually, I don't mind characters going in units, but I just wish it seemed mandatory for some armies. What else did I not overall like? I think that was really it for a lot of the stuff where I was just like, this needs a major change and a major change now. I think, as I said, the world can agree that Eldari need to change, and Knights need to change, whether it's fixing the towering rule or fixing the points. I think those are the biggest, like, these need to change and these need to change now. I'm surprised it's gone this long. I mean, I'm hoping with this weekend of tournament results, they've realized the mistakes that were made and how they need to be changed. And the rest of the stuff is stuff that, like, I'm personally hopeful changes or gets modified. I don't want to go into, like, each army's major issue, because obviously each army has a super good combination of stuff. Speaking from Custodes, Wardens are just absolutely insane. I've discussed within our play circle how I would fix Wardens. I guess my other biggest problem with the game, and I called it pretty much from the moment that they brought up the concept, was Devastating Wounds. Being able to change any profile into mortals is a very strong concept. I don't care if you're 1 damage. I don't care if you're 2d6 plus 20 damage. I don't care what the damage is. Having an unsavable damage is a very strong concept. Now you've applied that concept to weapons that do more than 1 damage. Now it becomes unfun. And then now you applied it to guns that can do more than 1 damage and automatically becomes 6s. Now we're to the point where I don't want to play my friend playing that stuff because I actually want to have fun playing. So again, that's a whole Eldari boogeyman concept. It's just Devastating Wounds needs to be reworked. I hope that's one of the first things they do. There are some people that pitch like, making it where it's capped at 6, or it's capped at some number, or it's this, it's that. I personally think Devastating Wounds should just be you do Immortal. Every 6 wound is Immortal. I think that's perfectly fine. I think the players playing those things would still be happy. Like, okay, cool, yeah, my 1D cannon no longer takes out 4 Marines. But instead, I have the potential to be like, all right, I kill 3, and I still, you can still get to the point of killing 4, but you would need to shoot 3 at them. You know what I mean? Like, it's you gotta roll decent, or not decently, but like, you wound with 3 of them. Sweet, 3 dudes are just dead if they fail their saves, and then on top of it, they get 3 mortals. So it's like I get 1 extra model for the amount of models I shot. I don't think anybody's gonna be upset about that. It just doesn't feel fun when a single individual model shoots at somebody and its profile is D6 plus 2, and then it all just turns into mortals because I happen to roll a 6 on some magical dice that can make it a 6. It's not fun. It's demoralizing to play against. Even from the competitive aspect, like it's not. I don't want to play against that. I don't want to go to a tournament. I don't want to spend, the $100 for the ticket, the possible $100+ to travel, get the hotel, drive on over there, get the Ubers or rental cars or walk or whatever I do, get to the event, and then I play 3 rounds of somebody going, I hit you 3 times, I have 3 6s, now you're taking 3d6 plus 6 mortals. Alright. I guess that unit's just gone now. Good talk. It's not a fun concept. So that's my biggest thing is I think Devastating Wounds should have been modified and should be modified too. It's just an extra mortal. Just call it a day. It makes it so much more simple. You don't have to add all these extra rules, and you don't have to keep the track of like, okay, how many mortals did that unit do? No. It's just immortal. 6 to wound. You will take, if you fail, you take X damage and immortal. You will be taking immortal. I think that's completely fine. I think that's completely fair. Now, done with the negative side of 10th edition and get to the things I like. Surprisingly enjoy... I shouldn't say enjoy for this part. Things that I find are fine. I was kind of against the mission pack initially. I was kind of against playing the Tempest of War style. But it's one of those things where it's like, if I have to play it, I'll play it. I'm no longer like anti this concept. Actually like a lot of the mission rules. I think some of them were really, really cool and really, really fun. Like supply lines, getting an extra CP and a 4-up. I mean, it's a nice little, possible shift of the tide concept in there, where it's like, hey, man, I really wish I had an extra CP this turn. You get it. Postponing or opponents possibly failing bringing in strategic reserve / deep strikes. Just kind of having that. I don't like the randomness of it. Like, I wouldn't like to show up to an event and each round isn't kind of like predetermined and we're just rolling for it. That I'm not a huge fan of, but like finding a good combination of mission rules, primary rules, and I forgot the third one was called. But like finding a nice combination between those 3 is kind of where I'd be. Like, I think that seems really, really cool, and you could come up with some really neat combinations where it's fun for both sides. Other things, again, the character thing as well for me. I don't love it. I don't hate it. Some things I would change about it, but in the end, I'm a lot more for it than I was against it like before. Power level, obviously, besides the big 2, or actually I would say the big 3, because I think if Eldari and Knights get nerfed and Custodes are left alone, I think Custodes just skyrocket. But if you're able to get those 3 armies back down to earth a little bit, I feel like this game can kind of feel like where Arcs of Omens was in the second half, where it's like everything kind of feels fun, everything kind of feels like it could win. Obviously, you'll still have the bottom of the barrel, but like everything still felt like, hey, you know what? I'm not showing up to a tournament with my favorite army and knowing I'm going to lose. It's like, hey, if I get some good matchups or dodge a couple matchups, I can end up having a good day, get to day 2 with a nice 3-0 record or 4-0 record. And I think that should be the goal. I think the goal of a game like this shouldn't be where, all right, well, I'm taking this army with me. Hopefully I win a round. Like, You should be able to play what you like to play and end the tournament at least 50-50. If it's a 6 round tournament, go 2-4, 3-3, or 4-2 pretty reliably. You shouldn't have to be like, well, 1-5 is my goal. Like, that doesn't sound like fun, especially with how expensive tournaments have gotten. Again, I don't want to spend $100 playing my favorite army and then getting just raffle stomped for 6 rounds. That sounds boring. But overall, I think the armies are in a decent spot. I think a lot of armies have really cool lore abilities. Again, they may have gone a little too far on some of them, but like Necrons, my God, they can reanimate everything. It's awesome though. Like, it's what they're supposed to do. They're not super powerful. They're not super strong. They're not going to table you. But my God, talk about like resource allocation. The army can just reanimate so well. I guess the downside of the game as well was kind of what I feared. Vehicles kind of feel like king right now. I didn't read the whole post, but I know we have an orc player in our playgroup as well. That was just like, cool, I guess I have to get 6 orc trucks because that's just the way we have to play now. We just play a whole bunch of orc trucks because they're the cheapest. Like, they're the best effective point per model unit we have. It's just, they're too good to not play, so we're just going to spam them, and that's how we're going to try getting our dudes up the board so we can get into combat, which is what we're supposed to be good at. So, again, I hope some things change with that. I don't like the fact that not every army has access to anti-vehicle, so maybe that's something they'll change. Maybe they'll, I don't know, introduce a new weapon for some of the Imperium armies, because again, I know Custodes don't have any anti-vehicle, Sisters don't have any anti-vehicle. I'm not 100% on AdMech, but I'd be surprised if they didn't. That's kind of was their thing. They had a decent amount of anti-vehicle in 9th. I know Grey Knights don't have any anti-vehicle, but that's the point. Like, if you're going to make vehicles so much more tougher with more wounds, you kind of need to give some tools for everybody to at least have a game against them. And I'm not saying give me anti-vehicle too, but like, even for Sisters, giving me a Melta that was, strength 12, d6 damage with like anti-vehicle 4 or 5. Even make it one shot. Just like give them some playability against him. I don't want to pop a vehicle in a turn, but I also don't want to shoot bolters at a vehicle for an entire game. I want some love. Give me something. So that's another change I would do, is give it more accessibility to the anti-keywords for where it makes sense. Obviously, I don't want some basic battle sister out there with an anti-vehicle 2 gun. That doesn't make any sense. But, a Retributor that has a specialty Melta that is like a strength 12 one-shot anti-vehicle 4. I don't know what we're hurting with that. Like, no sustained hits, no nothing extra. Just anti-vehicle 4, anti-vehicle 5, something. Just give me something I can get into vehicles and feel good about, instead of having to roll 6s for everything. Other pros about the game. I feel like I had so many more when I was initially thinking about doing this stream tonight. Scoring. The scoring in the missions are a lot more simplified. It'll just take time getting used to it, because they're so different in how many different ways you can score. But it's like 10% the higher strength shot was just barely scratching knights. Yeah, and yeah, that's essentially the issue, right? Like, that's the big problem, is that, like, even with anti-vehicle, because mostly anti-vehicle guns, unless you're knights, is pretty much like a D6 profile. So it's just, there's no good consistent damage against vehicles right now, which it'd be a nice change to see. Again, I'm not saying I want a one-shot knights. Like, let's get that out of there. I'm not saying give me a unit where I can just like boom a knight and I'm happy. But giving something to armies so they can feel like they can play the game against them. Because I know for a fact for Sisters, the highest strength gun that's not a hunter-killer missile is strength 10. So even if I were to bring like 3 castigators, I'm still wounding those things on 5. I think it's also only 1 or 2 shots too. Like, it's not even like I'm getting a whole bunch of shots into you. it's it's very saddening that they wanted to go so heavy into vehicles. And my thought process was like, okay, maybe they're going to give the vehicles a whole bunch of anti-vehicle guns, and we're just going to be forced to play parking lots, and that's just something I'm going to have to get used to. And it ended up not being that at all. They gave knights a whole bunch of anti-vehicle tools. They gave devastating wounds to a whole bunch of knight-style heavy toughness things, and it's just like, oh, all right, cool. I'm just, unless I spike the sixes or have a way to turn things into sixes, I'm just kind of, I look at knights and say I'm screwed. Especially because now they're also what, like OC8, OC10. I guess personally, as a custode player, I was pretty pissed when I saw we were only OC2 for our entire army. Like that felt insulting. I'm not saying make my whole codex better than OC2, but like give the Terminators OC3, the war, like my elite units, give them OC3. There's no reason why they should only be OC2. But I digress. Well, that's the thing, right? Like that was an argument that a lot of people were proposing to me, was that people get to bring, kind of dust up those older models that they haven't played in, 2 editions, 3 editions. And again, that's I'm glad that's something they can do for the fan base. And it's not a bad thing at all in the slightest. Like, that's cool. Bring out those old models, play them. But at the same time, it's like, if we're just playing 2 parking lots and we're wounding each other on 5s all game, we're not removing a model off the table. we're going to be shooting our big guns, and we're just going to be bouncing off each other the entire time. That should be the exciting part of the game, is the fact that, especially with this edition, there was so much hype for this edition initially, where they're talking about wanting to bring back a lot more of the casual fan base, a lot more of the players who quit in like this 7th, 8th edition era, and kind of bring them back to the game, which is obviously a huge bonus from a business side, and from an individual like myself and the guys that we have at Warpstone, where we just are so much more concerned about building a community than like having a competitive community. Like, we so much more just I personally would love to walk into a shop on a Saturday and not be able to find a place to play. Like, that's where I've been ever since I really got into the game and like tried to become an ambassador for the game. Is that I just would much rather see that. As long as there's dudes throwing dice, having a good time, dudes or gals throwing dice and having a good time, like, let's do it. Like, that's what I'm here for. This game was a lot of fun. I think 10th edition is very close, especially after playing it for a while. I'm still very hesitant of the game. And I think it's just because there's a lot of pieces broken. It'll be hard to fix them without going too far the other direction. Because I want to keep it its own identity. So I'm not sitting at the top of this hill like, let's bring it back to 9th. But I'm trying to find ways for their goals of 10th and making it where you just don't feel like you're not playing the game. And the biggest part of that, and the number one huge violator of that, is Devastating Wounds. I think they will make a lot of the fan base happy if they alter Devastating Wounds. As I said before, some people are like, oh, just don't make, the Fate dice or Miracle dice work as unmodified 6s. Simple, keyword change there. It's like, I think the most simplest way to do it is to just not make it be able to do a potential 8 mortals. Because out of all the games that I've tested at that, competitive level, and even with the guys that, we've had in the shop and within my play groups and the groups I'm a part of, there's people talking about getting table turn 2, turn 3, and that's stuff that they said at the beginning of this edition that they didn't want to have happen. And it's on the backs of things like Devastating Wounds. I guess I totally forgot about this. My other really big gripe with 10th edition, which I know a lot of my friends and playgroup guys agree with, is the missing impact of Psychic Phase. I didn't think it was that bad until I played against Grey Knights and I watched like a couple more games of Grey Knights, and it's like, wow, I like the difference of what Grey Knights could do with a psychic phase versus what they can do without a psychic phase is monumental. It is so much different now. I mean, don't get me. They have their movement tools. It is what it is, but like T-Suns still feel somewhat like a psychic army with their Cabal points and the ability to make weapons psychic weapons. But I feel like they missed the mark with what they wanted to do. I understood that a lot of some of the fan base, especially on the casual side of the game, didn't like the concept of being able to just have like an army do a whole bunch of mortals in a turn. And again, like I understand, we're in that part right now in the shooting phase where everybody has access to it, and that's not fun at all. So I think if they wanted to go after the psychic phase, I think the psychic phase should have been more based on like buffs and debuffs. Like, oh, my unit has +1 to save, or my unit has, or this turn you have -1 to save. You could have easily kept the psychic phase and taken away the mortals, or at least toned down how many mortals the unit can take. Like, oh, this turn, like whenever something shoots at you this turn, they have devastating wounds. Or smite now is just going to be a flat 1, and if it's a super smite, then it's D3. You could have easily done stuff like that. You easily could have toned down the mortals where people just didn't feel like they were getting smited to death. Where I was like, all right, cool, I could just lose a guy every smite. Now it's like, okay, my opponent needs to roll well, or it's like I lose maybe half a unit in the psychic phase versus 2 full units. I feel like that would have been a good way to fix the psychic phase instead of just pretty much eliminating it entirely. Granted, I know a whole bunch of debuffs and buffs kind of would have made bookkeeping a little bit more difficult, but I think people would have been a lot happier with their psychic armies if they were to been able to at least keep the psychic phase and still had some manipulation in that phase. Because, like I said, at this point, for T-Suns, even though they're super strong, they just feel like a glorified shooting army. And honestly, yeah, exactly. Like they could have changed it in so many different ways to where you could either even add the ability to get female pains or something, like some type of war gear upgrade, or if this character's attached, or there's so many ways they could have kept the psychic phase and then did not make it feel like you were just taking 1,000 mortals in a turn. But yeah, T-Suns just, I feel like from the experience I had, if you take away the ability for them to turn off saves of a single unit, they don't even feel like T-Suns. From what I watched, they don't feel like T-Suns at all. Yeah, but that's the point, right? Like, that was like the biggest thing about elves, at least for 9th edition, and from the experiences I've had talking to a lot of those players, was the fact that it was like your psychic phase was so pivotal in the fact that it let your small units trade up. And it wasn't even based on the fact that you were doing mortals. It was just based off the things of like Doom and Jinx and the ability to be like, all right, cool, fire and fade, or I move this character forward, he does his little thing, and then he's able to get teleported back from a psychic phase. And it took away identity of armies. Like Grey Knights now, as I said before, they move fast. They run around and they just like, all right, here I am. Neat. Don't get me wrong, there's some really cool tools that we found that you could do, but it's not the same. It doesn't feel like Grey Knights. And the 2 games I've solved T-Suns is like, all right, cool, we're just a bolter army that can turn off saves. Good luck, have fun. We have 2 stratagems that are just absolutely insane, and they go on our Terminators just like they did in 9th edition. Good luck, have fun. Like, it's just, I feel like it was a poor decision, or a hastened decision and balanced poorly. I feel like that should be the motto of 10th. A hastened decision modeled poorly. because 100%. Because there are so many small little beacons of light in 10th, but they're being overshadowed by just like the crazy egregious things that some armies can do. And even with some of the rules itself, like I said, cover. The way they simplified cover, fantastic. But now, if one model is benefiting from cover, the whole unit's benefiting from cover. Well, I feel like that's a step backwards. The way that they changed forests for like no reason. Forests are pretty much just like, why do we have them on the table anymore? Forests are just kind of null and void. They changed the fly rule. Probably the number one rule I didn't think I heard anybody complain about. I did not know. There was not a single player I once ever heard that were just like, you know what needs to be changed? The fly keyword. How dare you fly over that building? I don't know why we attacked that one. That was a weird one to go after. And then they simplified keywords, which was huge. They simplified stratagems. At first, I wasn't sure how I was going to feel about the stratagems, but even now, in the 5 games I've played, I used only 3 of them at all times. And my book was brought down from 20 stratagems to 8, and I still only used 3 consistently. It's just, if you design the army well enough, you won't necessarily need stratagems. And that's where, again, I feel like 10th is so close from being good, but I just don't know if or when they'll see the light. Like, I'm now kind of, I'm on the boat where it's like, until things change, I want nothing to do with this edition. Especially from a competitive aspect, I want nothing to do with this edition in a competitive aspect. If people want to get a couple games in and like you just want to throw, let's throw our best models on the table and see what happens, let's do it. I personally do not want to play against Eldari. If somebody says, hey, I want to play Eldari, I'm bringing 2 Wraith Knights and 3 D cannons, I'm going to be like, cool, you can find someone else. Yeah. Like, that's also a beneficial change, too, was the fact that you no longer can have a person just starting with 7 CP because their army abilities are just good enough. The fact that everybody starts at 0, we both gain 1 a turn. There's some armies that have the ability to gain an extra 1, or some missions as well. But, like, it makes it where you have to spend the CP where you need to spend it, and you can't just waste it, which is nice. Like I said, the CP changes and the stratagem changes, I think, are if not the best change to 10th edition. I think they hit that one on the head. They did such a good job. But I think the parts that they fell apart, besides the boogeymen, are list construction. I think it's very plain. I think it's very boring. I think it's very stale. You don't get to be creative at all in the list building. I don't know. Even just looking at the Custode stuff right now, I'm never playing bikes anymore. The Virtus Praetors are sitting on the desk forever. I will never touch those models again until they decide to fix whatever that decision was, what they did to them. Same thing with the bike captain. Like the 2 number 1 models, like when you're playing 9th edition Custodes, it was Trajan, bike captain, bikes. Those were top 3. And now the top 3, in my opinion, is shield captain, wardens, and then for me personally, it's a coin toss between Trajan and the blade champion. Like, I don't even think Trajan's the number 1 model in the codex anymore, or index. Which in 9th edition, I mean, it was, you couldn't leave home without him. He just gave you too many things. In this edition, like, the vanilla shield captain is so good. He is such an insane model for that army. You put him on a unit of wardens and you just let them cook. You just let them do what they need to do. But that's the point. Like, it's as Custodes right now, I think the fundamental 1,200 points, 3 bricks of wardens, 3 6-man bricks, a shield captain, Trajan, blade champion, and you're going from there after that. Whatever you want to do. From what we discovered from the tournaments this weekend, is Space Marines are pretty much Desolation Marines. Shocking there. Eldari looked like it was D Cannons and Wraith Knights. Like when you know your codec or your index for your 2K points is derived of 2 or 3 units and then the rest are just bodies on the table, it's not a good sign. Like you have poor army composition design. And that one I truly don't know how you fix. That one's a weird one. Because it's partially the war gear being free. It's partially the points. It's partially the abilities they attach. Like it's just like I would much rather see them, at least in this edition, instead of just increasing points on things, kind of taking some responsibility, and especially since rules are digital, just kind of going after index cards more often. Like, go after the characters more often in the data sheets. Instead of just being like, well, everybody's playing Wardens, so instead of a 300.6 brick, they're now a 500.6 brick. Like, it seems like such a lazy design. Like, hey, instead of increasing their points, let's make their once per game 4-up Feel No Pain a 5-up Feel No Pain. Instead of having each model with 5 attacks, they have 4 attacks. You could approach it in that sense instead of just being like, oh, let's raise points. Yeah, 10th is so close to being playable, it's crazy. But at the same time, it's so far away. Because I think the biggest problems are the hardest things to fix. Towering is the number one issue. There's no good way to fix it. Because you don't necessarily want to go back to how it was for 9th, where like a railgun will be able to see a knight, but it won't be able to see the railgun, and then the knight's just dead. But in the state of it right now, half the terrain shouldn't even, or more than half the terrain shouldn't even be on the battlefield because of how towering works now. And is it fun to punish all shooting armies by making all terrain magic boxes? Definitely not. I don't think that's fair to every other shooting army, but how else do you handle the towering keyword? Like, it's just, I don't know. I don't know if it's something along the lines of, to not try overcomplicating it. If you shoot through a piece of terrain, you're -1 to hit, kind of thing, or I don't know. Realistically speaking, I just kind of thought of that on the whim, and I think that might be the best decision. If your line goes over or through a piece of terrain, period, you're -1 to hit. I think that's like or worsen your ballistic skill by 1. So that way it stacks to being -1 to hit. Something along those lines. I think that might be the best way to do it. Because you can't say if they see, because obviously they can see them. Because that's the problem. That's the whole issue. But I actually don't hate that. Because that puts, most knights from 3s to 4s? Like, I don't hate that. I have not tested gambits. I will not test gambits. I want nothing to do with gambits. I'm not even going to get started with gambits. I've got enough. I've gone on enough tirades about those things. I will get nowhere near gambits. That is the dumbest idea they've ever come up with. If a tournament wants to run them, cool. If your friends want to run them, cool. If you guys want, again, that's all on you. I just don't think I could mentally take me beating somebody the whole game and then they just roll a 10 up and they beat me by 1 because I didn't beat them by enough because of a roll of the dice. It doesn't sit well with me. Now, it's something I proposed for Gambits was primary counts as double for you on your turn. You get like 2 points for every unit you kill. You get a point for every model you kill. Something that forces you to still interact with me. Not something that is just an arbitrary role that like I have no gameplay against. None whatsoever. Planning on running small adjustments in tournaments like banners and weapons, counting as being able to see targets. Not counting as seeing targets. So the cruddy part about that is rules as written is it's a model to model basis. Now, you can have that conversation with your opponent, typically beforehand, if that's how you guys want to play it. Obviously, we're not going to step in and say, no, you can't. But unfortunately, that's just the rules of 40K. How I've played it in the past and how I've played it with opponents is obviously people like kit bashing and people like adding things to models. I will go off of and I will ask my opponent, is that how the model is sculpted? Because again, I don't want you to be like, cool, I'm playing a Pathfinder, but I found this really cool because I've seen this. Somebody made like a really cool like samurai version of Tau to make, and they had the big back banners, like the big Japanese style samurai flags. And I'm like, that's cool as shit. Problem is, it basically doubles the size of the model. I would never look at my opponent and be like, oh yeah, I can see that kit bashed banner, I'm going to shoot at you. I wouldn't do that to my opponent. Obviously, there's players out there that will. And what the game plan is, especially because I'm probably going to be stepping out of the tournament realm and joining Ryan more on the TO side of things. That's something that we can always discuss, but unfortunately, with how the rules are written, that's a 40K thing. And trust me, I hate the rule. I think it absolutely sucks. I don't know how many times my opponents have pulled that on me at tournaments and have killed a unit because they're like, oh, I can see your gun, and no matter what way you turn your model, you can't see the gun. And it's like, you can't see anything else, but you can see the tip of my gun. Let's be a little real here kind of thing. But some people are like, oh, my model can see your model. So it's an unfortunate aspect of the game that was ambiguous and never really clarified. Ninth, it did count in ninth. I don't know about eighth, I didn't play in eighth, but in ninth, it did specify it's model to model. If my model sees any part of your model, I can shoot you. Which is why they clarified how cover works now, because if like you can't see the entirety part of my model or part of my base, you can't shoot me. Or, sorry, I will have the benefits of cover. But yeah, I don't... Trust me, I absolutely think the rule is stupid. I think it should be how most other games are, where there's... I know like Legion did it, where they had like an actual silhouette little marker that you can put behind your model, and if you can see the silhouette, then you can see them. So essentially, it's like they gave models actual hitboxes, like how you would see in a video game. And I thought the idea was really good, because it's one of those things where it's like, oh, well, I can see your guy pointing, and it's like, well, the silhouette is my torso, not my guy pointing. Because again, if you were to shoot me, cool, but I lost my hand. I'm not happy, but I lost my hand. And it's that same situation. If I have a banner on my back and you shoot at the banner in the back, cool, you might knock me down from the force. Like, I'm not happy, but I'm not dead. But yeah, that's something I can always bring up as well. But it's something it's never be afraid to just ask the opponent you're playing, hey, I have a whole bunch of kit patching stuff. I have a whole bunch of extra banners on my guys that aren't supposed to be there. Like, so the only time I would say no is like if it's actually supposed to be on the model. So like the Vexilia Praetors for Custodes, if you can see that banner, you can shoot me. That's part of the model. There's nothing I can do about it. But if it's something where, again, you have like a random infiltrator, but then you strap the, Gene Stealer on it because he's fighting it and you just thought the pose was really cool, and somebody could see the Gene Stealer, I would rule in your favor of, no, you can't. Like, you can't see him. Like, that wasn't supposed to be there. It was something they did for a rule of cool. And I don't want to punish anybody for a rule of cool. But Yeah, that's just the really shitty. That's like the dark side of competitive play. Unfortunately, is that there are people like that do that in tournaments or at the higher level of play. That's something that's like it's in my. Someone using a tank with a banner on the tank getting shot over train just for having that. Yeah, there's a story I was told very early into my competitive career where a person had a dreadnought and he kit bashed his dreadnought with like a blood angel banner of some sort. Like I think he took like the sanguinary priests, or no, the sanguinary ancient. He took that banner and like mounted it on top of the dreadnought. And his opponent's like, well, I can shoot you because of the banner. And he snapped the banner off the dreadnought. It was just like, you can no longer shoot him. And they called Judge. And he told the judge, he's like, the banner was part of a kit bash that I put on my dreadnought. It's not part of the actual model. And the judge is like, well, he's correct. It's not part of the actual dread. So he didn't like cheat in the middle of the game. So yeah, you can't shoot it anymore. Obviously, that's not stuff I would tell people to do. Don't break your shit on your models. But yes, like I said, it's one of those really cheap tricks you have in the back of your arsenal for when you get to like really, really high points in the tournament. That's kind of stuff that I would pull if somebody pulls it on me. That's always kind of been my rule for 40k is I'm usually pretty lax, but like once you kind of play rule lawyery against me, I'm gonna play it back to you. And most of the times people don't realize how much of the game I actually know, and it usually bites them in the butt. But that's how I would go with it. And if it ever does, especially at the Warp Storm tournaments, if it ever does become an issue, don't be afraid to call one of us over. Like I said, let us use our better judgment. Don't get into an argument with your opponent and anything like that. If your opponent wants to get upset because of our ruling, then that's something that they can get upset about. That's fine. Like I said, I don't want the hobbyists to feel dissuade from coming to tournaments because somebody's going to be like, well, I can see your cool kit-bashed model get fucked. Like, that's not what I'm here to do. So, I guess that would really matter. I feel like that feels like it's got to be even worse now with how non-LOS works. Because, I should say, with how heavy guns work now. Because if you stand still, you get the +1, and then if I claim I can see the butt end of some random part of your model, that means I do have line of sight to you. Then that means I get the +1 to hit, so I might be hitting you on 2s now because of the, yeah. I guess you get into muddy waters when you start talking about, at least from the not super competitive guys, you start getting into muddy water when you start talking about banners and kit bashes and stuff like that, because there is modeling for advantage and then there's modeling for disadvantage, and the competitive players are under that same boat. Is if you model for disadvantage, that's a decision you go to make, but if you model for advantage, you're a douchebag. So it's kind of like what am I looking for? Double standard in that concept where they will abuse you for modeling to a disadvantage, but they will fry you a new one if you model for advantage. Which is something I've brought up before too, because I've seen a lot of Custode players putting the bikes on the base and not on a flight stand, which if we're going by, the rule of law, that is significantly modeling for advantage. Significantly. Because it'd be very easy to hide bikes if I did not have to have them on the flight stand. So, just a little quick synopsis of everything I talked about tonight. Besides the two big games, Eldar Knights need major changes for, in my opinion, them to be really, really respected by the rest of the community, to be played against or for. Devastating Wounds needs to be modified to just being one extra mortal. I personally would like characters to be able to stand on their own a little bit versus needing to be attached to units. And I guess the other way around too. I know there's a couple units out there that kind of feel like crap unless they have a character. So kind of giving a little bit of a boost to both of those concepts. Modify cover in how I think it should be back to being a model by model basis. So that way you don't have the really cheeky lines. So keep it as worded, but get rid of the concept of if one model has cover, the whole unit has cover. That needs to go away, kind of thing. I love the fact that to be wholly within terrain to shoot out of it. I'm still on the fence over the Tempest of War style gameplay. I think the fixed missions are good enough. I'll be happy. It'll be nice to see not as many 100s being scored. So I'm curious in how there were. I guess I'll be curious to see what the points were over this last weekend and actually look at the points. But it'll be nice to see not as crazy scoring games. I feel like for 10th edition, player place terrain kinda will be destroyed, which I know for a lot of people will like it. Because there's just it gets even worse with player place terrain when it comes to some of those armies. Like it was felt before, it's felt even worse now. Another major change I like to see is the balancing of just raw power on data sheets alone, not necessarily armies, but there are very clear winners in your codex or index, and there are very clear losers in your indexes. Bring back the uniqueness. I guess that kind of stems into bringing back the uniqueness and creativeness to be able to build lists. Love the CP changes. I think it's the CP, the stratum changes, the key weapon keyword concepts, awesome. But yeah, overall, I think 10th for me to play it is like 10% of the way there. But it's one of those things where if they knock out the laundry list all at once, I think they'll just get like a flood of players back in. If they try to do this slowly, I think you're just going to dismiss a lot of players too quickly. Like if you just go, all right, here's all the big problems, one big ol' FAQ, data slate, let's fix all the errors now, and then hit the small stuff from there on out. But as of right now, if you're a knight and an Eldar player, enjoy your reign on top. And that's just the way it's going to be, unfortunately, for now. But I shouldn't say unfortunately. The reasons why they're on top is going to be the way that they are right now, unfortunately. Obviously, there's always going to be a best, but in my opinion, for a community standpoint, it's not fun to be the best because of a silly mechanic. But it's kind of sad when you have to have hey, let's talk about 10th. Well, we can't talk about Eldari because it's like they're not really part of 10th. They're playing 11th edition at this point. But yeah, that was it for me. Kind of just the things I wanted to discuss. And said I tried to keep it as positive possible. I think, like I said, there's hope. Coming from me, who was very, 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 very anti-10th almost this entire time. And after playing a couple games, and that's why I kind of wanted to wait a week as well. I kind of wanted to let all the emotions kind of simmer. But overall, still think that there's a lot of work that needs to be done. But if that work is done, this edition could be great. But on that note, that was it for me tonight. I hope everybody has a good night.